NAMI Tennessee at Home Live. I am super excited to be here with not one, but two amazing guests, but we'll get to them in a minute. We have some housekeeping items first. If you have not signed up for NAMI Tennessee's email list, what are you waiting for? It is absolutely free, and it's how you find out about all of the great things that NAMI Tennessee is doing. Things like, well, things like our gala, things like our NAMI walks, but more importantly, legislative advocacy always comes through our email list, and there are plenty of ways that you from home can help out people with serious and persistent mental illness and their loved ones. So we hope all of you will jump on to namitn.org and sign up for our email list. All right, that is enough of that. Here are our two wonderful guests. Who would like to introduce themselves first?
I could go first. So my name is Alison Wolf, and I work for Rogers Behavioral Health in the Community Learning and Engagement Department. I'm the Operation and Development Manager.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, that leaves you, Emily.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Jonesberg. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
What are you waiting for?
And I am the program manager with the Community Learning Engagement Department through Rogers Behavioral Health. And excited to be here today.
Thank you so much. I've got like the booming voice from above when I don't click the button in time. Thank you both so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. So today's topic is ending mental health stigma. And of course, we have our two special guests from Rogers Behavioral Health. But I wanted to start off at the very, very beginning. I think anybody who spent any time around NAMI has heard of the concept of stigma. But let's just make sure we're all playing with the same definitions. What exactly is mental health stigma?
Mental health stigma is when we hear stereotypes in the community around us and we internalize them. We either perpetuate them against ourselves, which would be called self-stigma. So that's when I may hear a common stereotype and start to believe it about my own identity. Or we may hear it out in the general public and we may experience it from others around us that plays a role in the way in which we interact with others around us.
That's awesome. I mean, that's an awesome definition. I would take about 3.5 hours to explain stigma because I've got just all of these ins and outs. So I like the nice succinct definition. I think the big takeaway, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that stigma hurts people. It limits people's opportunities. It limits people's chances, and it makes them feel bad about themselves, and it makes others question their motives. Whereas other people who weren't living with serious and persistent mental illness or weren't stigmatized would not have their motives, decisions, or even personality traits questioned in the same way. Is it fair to say that it's a form of discrimination?
Oh, most certainly. Yeah. When stigma gets internalized into institutionalized practices, for example, it certainly turns into a stigmatizing action that impacts people's housing, their access to employment, their access to healthcare, really ultimately their treatment too, if they're seeking treatment for mental health services. And it's one, as I mentioned, with the individual self-stigma, there's also the public, and then there's the institutional. So you really see it being played out in 3 different ways and 3 different opportunities for us to interrupt it as well and do something about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. Before we move on to the next question, Alison, did you have anything to add? I don't want to skip over you.
No, I appreciate that. I was just thinking about the shame that can come with that self-stigma that keeps us from sharing with others of what's going on in our lives.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, I've got the big booming voice from out of nowhere. All right. So the question that I have is how prevalent is mental health stigma? Is this, for lack of a better word, is this a big deal? Is this something that causes a lot of problems, or is it just kind of this under the radar thing we're just trying to swat away?
Yeah, it is a pretty prevalent issue. And I guess I'll start first with the prevalence of mental health challenges and mental illness and from the get-go. And that is that CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has research that shows that 50% of us are going to experience a mental health challenge or a mental health illness in the course of our lifetime. And in any given year, 1 in 5 people will be experiencing a mental illness. So really something incredibly prevalent that if those of us listening and participating in today's experience, either something you personally can relate to, or certainly those within your circle, your loved ones, your friends, your family experience. And yet, even though it's so prevalent, there's also so many negative messages and so much stigma out in the world around us For example, it's suspected that over half of people that are experiencing a mental health challenge are reluctant or do not seek treatment for mental health challenges. And a main reason they indicate not accessing support for the mental health challenge is because of the stigma associated with it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Allison, anything to add?
Well said, Emily.
All right, we're firing on all cylinders here. Thank you so much. The one of the questions that does pop into my mind, and this can be for either Emily or Allison. You mentioned that people don't want to seek services because of fear of of stigma. Now, I want to disclose, the audience knows, I want to make sure that too. You know, I live with bipolar disorder, and I completely understand that. Right? I didn't want to go seek help because I didn't want to get fired from my job. I didn't want my family to think less of me. I didn't want to lose friends. I didn't want people to not let me play with their children for fear of, just for fear. But I want to put it out there for a larger discussion for the audience. People are very, very sick, and there does seem to be some acknowledgement that they're sick and that they need help, but the fear of stigma and the fear of being discriminated against and stigmatized is so great that they don't seek that help. What's the, for lack of a better word, mechanism there? Because in order to not seek help, there has to be some desire to remain sick, or at least some trade, right? It has to be worth it. And I don't think a lot of people understand that concept.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things is people don't understand what treatment is. And if they understood better what treatment is, they might be more apt to seek it. I was talking with Emily earlier, and in my circle of the people that I know is one of the reasons they don't seek help. And I've heard this over the years, is they're afraid they're going to be put away. And they haven't heard the wonderful stories of the wonderful recovery that can happen after treatment and the different types of treatment that are available, from just beginning with therapy to intensive outpatient, et cetera, to residential care for a period of time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for addressing that. I know that treatment can be scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
I often use the example that, you know, going to the dentist can be scary too, but people are willing to overcome going to the dentist. We all, you know, kvetch about root canals and tooth pain, et cetera, but ultimately we end up in the chair. That's because, of course, not going to the dentist is stigmatized. If you complain about your tooth too long, people are like, what's wrong with you? Go to the dentist. Don't be a baby. Go to the dentist. Go to the dentist. Get it over with. Whereas in mental health, if you don't go, you're actually sort of rewarded. Well, at least you're not the crazy one. Well, at least you don't need help. Well, at least you're managing on your own. And then there's also this general, you know, pick yourself up from your bootstraps, or, you know, be strong enough to get over it yourself. We don't reward people for seeking help. Is not rewarding people for seeking help that form of stigma? Because again, we do reward people for going to the dentist. We all agree that it sucks and we call them brave, but we don't have that same reward system in place for people who are seeking mental health help.
Yeah, I'd agree, Gabe. Or even that positive outlook, like you said, you're given kind of kudos for taking care of your body if you're able to make those annual visits, whether it's the doctor or the dentist, but you're perhaps shamed or put a negative light on you if you say you do need to access mental health services. It makes me think of a pretty common stereotype that connects back to mental health, which is that folks are just weak, or they just need to snap out of it if they're experiencing some sort of mental health challenge. And I think that is a huge driver of some self-stigma as to why folks don't reach out for help. They just feel if they wait longer, if they change something small in their life, that they'll be able to take care of this themselves, when in reality, probably the best route is to seek some of that professional support. Yeah, but you're right, without that positive light on it from society, there's lots of motivation for folks to not seek that.
I think there's also this tendency to believe that people are doing this. I know I can only use my own lived experience, but I didn't seek help. And when I looked around, I thought, well, nobody else did either, and they're all fine. Well, the problem is that some of those people did seek help. They just didn't tell anyone. So therefore, I believed that they weren't seeking help, even though they were. And two, many of the people who didn't seek help that I thought were fine were anything but. They were suffering quite a bit. They just they kept that away from me for whatever reason. So is that a form of stigma as well? This, oh, I'm just fine, which puts out there this idea that it's possible to manage this on your own, while hiding all of the symptoms, trauma, problems, issues, and in some cases, hiding the fact that you might be seeking help at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that decision is made based off of stigma and stigmatizing beliefs around people, right? That they're deciding, even though I'm struggling, I'm not willing to let people in and see that, is I don't want to face being labeled or experiencing some of the discrimination that's real that I may experience after disclosing. But it also then prevents folks from getting the support they need. And to your point, being able to advocate really for a society that is more accepting of us taking care of our mental health. We all have mental health, just like we have physical health. It's something that needs to be tended to and cared for. And there is a lot of work for us to do to dismantle the stigma around it so folks feel like they can access those supports out there.
Now, Rogers Behavioral Health is doing that work, I believe, and I know nothing about this, so you're going to be teaching me along with our audience, and I'm excited. You have a program called WISE, and my question is, what is WISE? I don't even have a thought. That's how little I know, so I'm very excited to find out what the WISE program is.
Well, we're excited to share with you what the WISE program is and all of your listeners as well. It's the Initiative for Stigma Elimination. So we're using the ISE, the W. It used to be Wisconsin, and we realized that Rogers is in 10 states across the country. And so we wanted to make sure that everyone is included in. So we call it WISE, Initiative for Stigma Elimination. And so, as I said before, it's a nationwide coalition of organizations and individuals who are promoting inclusion and support for those affected by mental illness and addiction, substance use, through the advancement of evidence-based practices for stigma reduction efforts. Emily's going to share in a little bit some of the programs that we offer through WISE, which we've kind of already addressed with, you'll hear as she shares more, that they really address the stigma around mental health. Our work is very collaborative. We have an executive committee of community members. They're not Rogers employees that direct our work. And we also have a planning committee from the community that helps us plan each of our WISE coalition meetings. And I can share a little bit more about those meetings a little later. Our department, Community Learning Engagement, supports the work of WISE through facilitation and also financial support. And we produce newsletters. We have upcoming events, programs, partner updates. We have research highlights in our newsletter that we put out at least once a month, sometimes more often. Within WISE, we have over 100 organizations that are identifying with us, participating with us, and then many individuals who are involved. Many of the individuals who are involved are certified peer support specialists. So certainly they are walking the walk and want to help others in recovery. And we have an excellent website I'm sure you're going to share with everyone later, eliminatestigma.org, that has a lot of information about WISE and how you can learn more.
Before we jump into the next question, there was a question about WISE representation in California.
So we have had, I don't know if I'm going to be able to come up with it offhand. I should have had a list in front of me. I think we do have 1 or 2 organizations that have participated in our WISE coalition meetings.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know that later on we'll have I'm assuming that there's a website or something that lists all of the available programs, and we will get to that a little later on in the show. So Eric, stick around and you'll find out more about whether or not they're in California. All right, jumping into the next question. What programs does WISE offer to reduce mental health stigma? And I imagine this is probably, there's a lot of information here. So everybody buckle in, we're going to be learning.
And hopefully Emily has some water nearby.
Yeah. Well, like if I can say first, before I jump into all the programs, one major component that has informed the creation of our programs is research that's been done around stigma elimination. And we do have an academic partner of ours, Dr. Pat Corrigan, and he has done a lot of research internationally around mental health and its stigma as it relates to mental health challenges. And one of the main findings he's found, and along with many other researchers, is that as you experience or you're trying to combat mental health stigma, one of the best ways to do that is get to know someone who has a mental health challenge, and for folks to share their story. And for their story, when they share it, to have a good percentage of it, maybe about 50%, focused on recovery and strength and the benefits that they see or ways that this mental health challenge has positively contributed to their identity, to their life, to their approach with others. So with that in mind, we've taken that to really inform 4 key programs that we offer through WISE, and they are all available on our website at eliminatestigma.org. The first is like a Stigma 101 kind of presentation. It walks you through the basics of mental health stigma, talks a little bit about that research that I just indicated. and helps people think about what they can do next to fight stigma, whether that's sharing their story, getting to know others, taking a chance to take a stand against things at an advocacy level. And then the next program that kind of folds into that is called our Up to Me program. And that actually comes off of a program that Dr. Pat Corrigan created that's called Honest, Open, Proud. Up to Me is more of a youth-based version, though we're making a couple other versions for parents and adults right now. And the focus of that is if indeed telling our story is going to be one of those things that combats stigma, then we wanted to be able to prepare people to share their story in a way that felt empowering to them. So that Up to Me program is all about helping people think about their self-talk, both positive and negative, opportunities to challenge that negative self-talk. And then as they think about sharing their story, where do they see the pros and cons of doing so? How could they respond to negative feedback in a way that feels right to them? And what are different ways in which they could share their story that would help reach their why for sharing their story? So that's a nice free resource that if you're thinking about sharing your story and you want a little bit more support around it, I'd recommend the Up to Me. And then our third is called 7 Promises or Safe Person. So let's say someone's using the Up to Me curriculum and they decide they're going to share their story, or even just a friend comes to you and they're in need of support and they start sharing some of their challenges. The Safe Person program is going to walk you through 7 different promises that you as a supportive person are going to do your best to follow, so you truly can hear them and think about how to best support them. So then that leads into our fourth one, and that's compassion resilience. And it's kind of an interesting twist from the route I just referenced with the Stigma 101 to Up to Me and Safe Person. Another thing that we found when we looked at where people are experiencing stigma and why is we actually did a number of focus groups with folks with lived experience and asked them where they experience stigma the most. And they shared places like in the education system, the healthcare system, both physical and mental health care systems, even their faith-based communities. And a lot of research backs that up, that those are some of the most stigmatizing environments. And it got us really intrigued because here are people that got into the work because they care about other individuals, and yet they were acting at times in stigmatizing ways. We found it was because these folks in these different professions were feeling pretty burnt out. They're hard places to work. They're very complex. There's a lot of gray area. Perhaps they don't have the supervision or support that they thought they were going to have going into it. Maybe even high rates of secondary trauma. So being exposed to a lot of the tough stuff that those that they support are experiencing. And we realized that when folks feel burnt out as humans, when we feel a high rate of compassion fatigue, we're much more likely to fall back on our early socialization. So as I mentioned in the beginning of our time together, those stigmatizing beliefs that we've heard through public stigma or even institutional stigma, we're more likely to pull those up when we're tired and act on them and behave in stigmatizing ways. So to help support these providers in challenging their stigmatizing beliefs and creating more equitable environments, we created our Compassion Resilience Toolkit. And that one's really aimed at creating systems or organizations, teams, and individuals that are really grounded in compassion and compassion resilience in a place of well-being so that they can best fight these stigmatizing beliefs.
Oh, that's there's a lot of information there. Thank you so much. And I know I flashed the website on to, of course, learn more. But it has me thinking, and I imagine the listeners the same. What has been effective? I mean, that's a lot of information right there. What's been effective as it relates to mental health?
In terms of what we have found, and again, a lot of it plays off of the research from Patrick Corrigan, is that the personal empowerment is very important. The personal empowerment is, which is the name of his organization too, at the university in the Illinois Institute of Technology at the national is called the National Consortium on Stigma and Empowerment. Sorry that I was word salading there. And so it really is finding other people's stories and listening to other people's stories is what can really help other people learn more about mental health stigma and reducing that stigma. Emily, do you have anything?
Yeah, if I could just add, it's interesting in the research that Pat Corrigan's done, he found that when we did education alone, which was kind of I have a social work background, a lot of my education coming up, and I also someone with lived experience, I was often kind of under the assumption that if I just learned a bunch educationally about mental health and mental health challenges, that I'd be able to fight my own stigma and that I would be better about not perpetuating stigma around me to those around me. And research shows that actually that education alone, it may have a slight benefit in the moment, but after being surveyed months and years later, it actually can cause an increase in stigmatizing beliefs, just getting the education around a mental health challenge. And really the part that shows having a positive impact in combating stigma on a long-term basis is just what Alison was talking about, that personal story, getting to know people for who they are, both the challenges that they've had in regards to mental health, but also their recovery story. And that then when I'm able to put a face and a name with a mental health condition and say, I feel like I know this person, it's much more likely I can fight against stigma in that realm.
I love that. Now, I sort of believe that I know the answer to the second question based on what both of you just said. But in addition to accessing your programs, how else can people engage in stigma reduction work? I can't help it. I'm so excited. I want to say, meet people, talk about it, keep the conversation open, and be supportive. But I want you to answer it because you're the expert.
And you're right, Gabe.
I got excited.
Yeah. And you're right, Gabe. It's that it's the peer stories. It's talking to someone that is more like me. The research also shows that sports stars and personalities don't have as much of an effect as if we are talking and sharing and learning from someone who is sharing their own personal story, where we have an opportunity to ask questions and talk with them in more depth. But some of the other ways with the stigma reduction work is certainly language choice, using words that are more relatable, clearer, more neutral. An example would be, there are a lot of people who have it much more worse than you. And instead, we'd want to soften that and say, I'm really sorry you're going through this. I'm here for you. And there's many things on the WISE website, and I'm sure other websites too that share this. One really good one for teens is Seize the Awkward, where they really role play the difficult conversations where a teen might really think that one of their friends might be having a problem, but they're a little scared to ask, and it helps give that language. And there's also a lot of laughter, which Gabe, I know you encourage, and I think the laughter and the humor really can help as well. Also, so really getting to know others who have mental health challenges. And one way to do that, maybe you think, I don't know anybody, which would be rare, but you can watch videos. And as I said, with Seize the Awkward, and we found that the power of story is very, very powerful. And there are many videos on the WISE website as well. And you can search them by different topic areas where you can hear first-person recovery stories, and it starts to humanize what you might have just thought of as an illness, and now you can see it through someone's walk with that mental illness.
I love that. As obviously as the host of the show, as a podcaster and a speaker, I love talking and I love sharing stories, and I think that it just has an incredible amount of value. So I'm really, really glad that the data is backing it up, that having these open conversations, because it's one thing to say, hey, we need to be more vulnerable and talk more, and it's another thing to say, hey, that's working. And I'm really glad organizations like yours are out there to show us that it is working, so that we're not just randomly giving advice. Because, in the early days of this movement, that's all we really had. We were just sort of throwing spaghetti at the counter or at the cabinet and seeing what stuck, as my grandmother would say. So I've popped on the screen a couple of times the various websites. How can listeners connect with WISE and Rogers Behavioral Health? So there's all of them as well. I also put them in all of the chat so that folks can click on them. But would one of you go over the differences between all three of these and what they can find and which one they should access?
Sure, certainly. So that first one, eliminatestigma.org, is our WISE website. So all the programs that I was talking about are available for free on that website, along with lots of other resources, including those stories that Alison was mentioning, and resources around language choice and lots of other things. So I highly encourage you to check it out. Oh, and I should reference the WISE Coalition meetings that Alison was mentioning. Those are free and are open to anyone who'd like to attend. They happen quarterly. You can sign up to learn more about them through our newsletter on that website as well, eliminatestigma.org. And then the middle one is Rogers Behavioral Health, or rogersbh.org/resources. That's one of Rogers' website pages, and it has a link to lots of great resources around mental health. So whether it's educational or, again, more stories or resources that people may be looking for, we just recommend if you're looking for any additional resources to check that page out. And then the final WISE at eliminatestigma.org is our email address. So if you're looking to get in touch with Alison and I or anyone from our community learning and engagement team, would like to learn more about the work we do or collaborate alongside us, please don't be shy. Feel free to send an email our way, and we would love to get in touch and collaborate with you moving forward.
I think that's wonderful. And just to, I want to make sure that I say this correctly. This is available across the nation. It's not just a Tennessee initiative.
That's correct. Across the whole nation. And everything on the website is free.
Everything is free. It's across the whole nation, not just Tennessee. Those are really the takeaways. So if there's not something in California, there's an opportunity to get something going. And these are the places you want to start to find out if it's available or how to get something started.
And Gabe, I wouldn't even limit it to national. We've got lots of international folks that we see logging in and accessing the resources. And I have no doubt you have some international listeners as well. So it's not limited to the United States either.
Oh, that is super awesome. I know that we're almost out of time here, but this is sort of my favorite part of the show. It's the final thoughts. I wanted to title this, you can ask yourself any question and answer it yourself, but it was like, that's just a lot to put in the little bubble down there. But do you have any final thoughts for our viewers before we head off into the sunset?
Well, thank you all for joining us, and it's been really nice to be here. Behind Emily is the Safe Person decal, and it is available in Spanish and English. Oh, she's got it right there.
Ooh,
and we'll ship those out, 25 for free to anyone who'd like those. You can read more about that on the website. And our WISE Coalition meetings this year are focusing on substance use and the stigma around substance use and mental health challenges. When those two intersect, it's a lot more difficult. The stigma goes way up, the research shows us. So we keep saying it, but the meeting titles and everything is on the website, and you can click and register. Those also are free. And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Emily, do you have any final thoughts before we head out?
I just encourage folks to care for themselves. I know it's tough times right now and all the time, it seems. And we are here. We want to be here as a support for you. And we hope that some of these resources that we've highlighted today are ones that you can use to help yourself and help those around you as well, as we work to create this more accessible, equitable, stigma-free world that we're able to eliminate the stigma as it relates to not just mental health challenges, but all sorts of forms of discrimination. So thanks for your time today. And it's been great to be with everyone.
Oh, thank you both so much for being here. So before we head off entirely, remember, there are so many good newsletters, but NAMI Tennessee's and the Rogers Behavioral Health WISE newsletter are the two best in all the world. I feel like maybe that's not entirely true, but for the purposes of this broadcast, I think like all in favor, ours are the best. I mean, look at that. It's unanimous. When do you get a unanimous vote? Sincerely, join NAMI Tennessee's email list. It's absolutely free, namitn.org. And before we end, I want to pop up the websites to get more information. And of course, their email addresses there at the end. I also put it in the chat. They would both, Alison and Emily, love to hear from you. They're very, very nice people. I can vouch for them. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and let's do our best to eliminate as much stigma as possible in 2023. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank both of you for being here. Big, big round of applause. And we will see you next time on NAMI Tennessee at Home.